Donald Trump announced his new round of steel and aluminum tariffs, and we know the economic impacts. The stocks of a lot of companies that are dependent on those materials dropped. Those companies now are gonna have to charge higher prices. People are worried about that, and so the stocks go down, which means that if you're one of the people who've invested in those companies, you might have lost a lot of money. We're talking about a lot of different companies, a lot of different shareholders. It's really complicated. So to simplify it, let's talk about one person and one company, an individual that didn't end up losing a lot of money, and let's try to figure out how that happened. The company we're gonna be talking about is Manitowoc, which uses steel and aluminum, things like that. And the individual is Carl Icahn, a name that you might have heard before because he was a former special advisor to Donald Trump, who, by the way, really fast, ended up leaving the administration because of concerns of conflicts of interest, which was a prescient position, which we're gonna now return to this graphic. He sold $31.3 million of shares in Manitowoc, a company heavily dependent on steel imports, last week. Now, according to a regulatory filing that he put out, he was able to sell his shares for between $32 to $34. After the announcement about the tariffs, it had dropped to $26.37 per share. The value of the shares he sold has since dropped by around $6 million, which means that just due to dumb luck, since he sold the stocks last week, he saved himself $6 million. Carl Icahn, former advisor and close friend of the president, the man who unilaterally decided to do these tariffs. Isn't it interesting how it works out in government these days?
So 2 more pieces of context on Carl Icahn. So he gave a huge loan to Donald Trump earlier in Trump's career and saved his skin. The other guy who did that was Wilbur Ross, who's now the Commerce Secretary, who, by the way, also pushed for these tariffs. In fact, was the leading person inside the Donald Trump cabinet pushing for these tariffs. Now, I don't know what Wilbur Ross's economic gain in this is or not. We do know Carl Icahn's gain, but they are both close allies of the president, and the president said, well, look, I trust Carl Icahn. And the second piece of context is he talks to these friends and allies all the time. In fact, it greatly frustrates the White House staff and especially the chief of staff that they'll go set positions and then at night Trump will call all of his buddies and go, what do you think? And in fact, one of the hilarious revelations about the Trump White House was that when they kept searching for who the leaker is, and it turned out it was Trump, because he was calling all his friends and blabbing about everything that happened, and the friends were leaking to the press. So is it possible that Carl Icahn got a call from Donald Trump before he made this decision? And perhaps not even in a nefarious way for Trump. Like, hey, buddy, you're never gonna believe what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna do a 25% tariff on steel. Carl's like, oh, thank you. Really good to know. I gotta go.
Yeah, and as he's talking to Trump, Trump can hear keyboard keys clicking.
By the way, there are congressional laws against this, right? I mean, at least in Congress, you're not allowed to say outside information about policy that could affect stock prices and stuff like that. This is insider trading, but maybe doesn't fit the exact definition of insider trading. Also, Icahn is another New York billionaire who Trump is friends with and kind of has these shady ties as well. So he's just still remaining within his own New York bubble when he was on The Apprentice and just shuffling those people in and out of the White House with his influence.
Yeah, it's interesting. Insider trading, it's funny to say Emma's making a point that's interesting because insider trading is typically thought of as coming from inside a company, and then you're sharing proprietary information to those who are not inside the company. In this case, you're sharing public policy or what will become public policy with someone who has a vested interest in that policy. It does happen on Capitol Hill. You know, there is no law forcing divestiture in a lot of these different holdings that senators and congressmen have, and they have committees that are actually in charge of many of the corporations and corporate interests that they still maintain, financial interests I'm talking about. So
Tom Price got in trouble for that.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so let me just be clear about something. There's no law saying you got to get rid of all of your stocks that you might weigh in on. But to Emma's point, a number of years ago, they passed a law saying, yes, but you can't do, because they were doing it rampant, of course. I know you're going to be shocked to find out that congressmen might be corrupt, but they would, before their votes in committee, et cetera, they would then do trades, either buy or sell something, because they knew it was going to have an effect on the economy. So it got so bad that finally there was a lot of public pressure, and they passed a law saying you're not allowed to trade on information that you know, even though you're not inside a company, you're inside the government, and you're going to affect the markets. Now that applies to people in Congress. whether Donald Trump as president is allowed to do that for a friend is a different question. I mean, we all know ethically that's a terrible thing and you shouldn't do that, and that gives your friends who are billionaires and probably also donors and gave you money earlier in your career an unbelievable advantage, millions of dollars in advantage over everyone else. But it would be interesting to see if it's something that they could investigate to see if Trump broke any rules of the White House or laws in terms of giving that information to Carl Icahn, whether he realized he was giving it away or not.
Yeah, that's why I say it's interesting. It may not pass the litmus test for what is purely insider trading as we think about it.
It toes the line, but it's certainly unethical, as you said. Who knows if there's a statute in place? I mean, we've never seen a president like this who would brazenly do something like this, so I doubt there is a law in place.
Yeah, I mean, look, if I was the president and Mark's my friend and he runs an oil company and I'm gonna start a war in the Middle East, which is going to create instability and drive oil prices up, and everybody in the world knows that, and I give Mark a call beforehand going, Mark, I might or might not start dropping bombs in Iraq, if you know what I mean, and then he sells his shares or increases his shares. Come on, that's obviously wrong. Then he has information that other people don't have, and that's the whole point of insider trading as a concept. And so that's what Trump is doing here. By the way, one last thing. Again, I might be being too kind to Donald Trump and saying he doesn't know, he might not know that he's giving Carl Icahn this information that would be really valuable. I say that partly because in not being generous to him, he's not very bright, so he might not realize it. But Carl Icahn is bright. And so not only would he receive that information and know exactly what to do with it, as apparently he did, but he might also plant that idea in Trump's head.
Oh yeah.
So now in this case, I doubt it because Icahn was holding stocks of the companies that would actually go down, right? I think he's just reacting to the information. But if he wanted stuff that he wanted to put into Trump's head, I mean, on those late night calls powered by Quarter Pounder and Jesus, he could be like, oh, Donald, you're gonna let China push you around? I mean, they're just a cute little country. You're not gonna let them do that to you, are you? And then Trump, by the way, wrote on Twitter, I mean, how hard is it to manipulate this guy? In big all cap letters, if you don't have steel, you don't have a country. So I could just call him and be like, Donald, you want a country, don't you?
Yeah, and really fast, I've heard that there have been in the past week or two, there have been ads on some Fox programs sort of pushing for a policy change on this to protect the steel industry.
Oh, there you go.
He's going to be watching.
And doubly real fast, a lot of the more recent Trump projects, I'm talking about building projects, have used, as we probably detailed on this, on TYT many times, overwhelmingly imported steel. So, I mean, his buildings, his structures, those Trump landmarks, that's imported steel you're looking at.
You just watched a video by the Young Turks, home of the revolution. If you'd like to get a lot more than that, get the full show by becoming a member. tytnetwork.com/join.